I was 19 when I moved to Houston, Texas, for med school. I came from a small town in Kentucky, so Houston felt like a different planet. Big, loud, endless traffic, endless people. Between classes and labs that ran late into the evening, I needed a way to pay for rent and food. So I picked up a part-time job at a gas station on the outskirts of the city. The place wasn't on a main road. It sat on this long stretch that connected a smaller county road to the highway. During the day, it wasn't too bad. You'd get truckers, travelers, a few locals. But after 10 p.m., the shift became mine alone. Just me, the humming fluorescent lights, and the constant hum of refrigerators behind the counter. At first, the silence bothered me, but after a few weeks, I got used to it. I'd study in between customers, watch people wander in half-drunk from the bar down the road, or grab a snack from the shelves. The nights started blending together until the old man and the little girl showed up. It was around 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, the first time I saw them. I remember it clearly because it had been dead quiet for nearly an hour. No cars, no people. Then the bell above the door jingled, and in walked this man in a dark overcoat and a little girl who looked maybe 8 or 9. She had this pale complexion, long brown hair, and these eyes that seemed too large for her face. They didn't drive up. They just walked in, on foot. Now here's the thing. There weren't any houses nearby. For at least a couple of miles in either direction, it was nothing but empty fields, a wooded patch, and the occasional industrial lot. It made no sense for them to be out here, especially that late at night. The old man didn't say much. He'd buy the same thing every time, a cup of coffee for himself, and a chocolate bar for the girl. She never spoke, never smiled, just stared, not in a childish way, but in this unsettling, unblinking way that made me shift in place whenever I caught her eyes. I tried making small talk once. I asked the old man if they lived nearby. He looked at me for a long second, then said, "Close enough." His voice was raspy, like he hadn't spoken in a while. The girl never broke her stare. They became regulars. Almost every night that week, around the same exact time, I'd hear the bell, and there they were, walking in from the darkness outside. Same coffee, same chocolate, same silence. It got to the point where I started dreading that part of my shift. One night, around midnight, I stepped outside for a smoke. The road was dead, not a single pair of headlights in sight. But as I turned to flick the ash, I saw them. The old man and the girl, just standing on the far side of the lot, watching me. They weren't walking toward the store. They were just standing there in the shadows, still as stone. I went back inside fast and locked the door. A few minutes later, the bell rang anyway. I froze. I hadn't unlocked it. Yet when I turned around, they were inside, at the counter. Same coffee, same chocolate, neither acknowledging what just happened. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I wasn't the only one who noticed something off. One of the truckers, a guy named Ray who stopped by almost every night, asked me about them. He said he'd seen them on the road, walking in the dark, but when he slowed down to offer a ride, they were just gone, like they vanished into the fields. Another regular, a nurse who'd grab snacks after her late shifts, told me she swore she'd seen the same pair back in the early 90s when she was a kid. Same old man, same girl, but the girl looked exactly the same as she did now. I didn't believe it until the night I made a mistake. They came in again, and when the old man went to pour his coffee, I leaned down to the girl and whispered, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" Her lips curled into the faintest smile. She finally spoke, but it wasn't a whisper. Her voice was sharp, clear, too mature for her face. "You shouldn't stay here so late." And she walked out with the old man. I didn't finish my shift. I left the register, locked up, and called in sick for the rest of the week. When I went back the following Monday, my manager asked if I'd been drinking on the job. He said the security footage showed me talking to nobody. No old man, no girl, just me, standing there, whispering into the empty air, then locking up early. I quit 2 weeks later. But even now, driving home late from the hospital after rotations, I sometimes catch myself looking at the sidewalks, the gas stations I pass, scanning the dark corners, half expecting to see an old man in a long coat, and a little girl, just watching. I used to work as a night security guard in a small town in Arkansas. It wasn't a glamorous job, just me, my flashlight, and an empty lot I was paid to keep an eye on. The place was an abandoned textile factory that had been bought up by some out-of-state investor who planned on turning it into storage units. My job was simple: sit in a little security booth from 8 p.m. until sunrise, walk the property once an hour, and make sure no kids or trespassers got inside. For almost 2 years, nothing ever happened. Most nights, it was just the sound of crickets, the occasional passing car, and the buzz of the overhead floodlights. Easy money, I used to tell myself. But everything changed one night in late October. It was around 1 a.m. I was standing outside the booth, sipping coffee, when I heard the screech of tires. My head snapped toward the road that ran past the property. A small sedan swerved, horn blaring, and in that split second I saw a girl, no older than 20. Crossing the street, the impact was loud, sickening. Her body rolled onto the hood, then hit the pavement. I dropped my cup and ran, but by the time I reached her, it was too late. She wasn't moving. Blood pooled beneath her head, spreading across the cracked asphalt. The driver had already sped off into the night. I froze there, my hands shaking above her, not knowing what to do. By the time the police and ambulance arrived, I was still in shock. They questioned me, took my statement, but the only thing I could remember clearly was her face. Pale, eyes wide open, almost like she was staring directly at me even in death. That image never left me. The first few nights after, I couldn't sleep. I'd sit in the booth, try to read or watch something on my phone, but my mind kept replaying it. The sound of the tires, the crunch of metal, the thud of her body. And then, a week later, I started seeing her. It was subtle at first. I'd be doing my rounds, walking past the broken chain-link fence, when I'd catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye. A girl, standing in the shadows, just far enough that I couldn't make out her face. But I knew it was her. Another night, I heard it. A faint whisper carried on the wind. At first, I thought it was the trees. Then it grew clearer. A woman's voice. "Help me." I spun around with my flashlight, scanning the dark lot, but there was no one there. The lot was always empty. Then the smell started. That metallic, coppery smell of blood. It would hit me randomly, inside the booth, out by the fence, even in my car as I drove home. Thick, suffocating, impossible to ignore. I checked everywhere, thinking maybe an animal had crawled under the booth or died nearby. Nothing. The whispers got worse. They didn't stop at "help me." Sometimes it was my name. Sometimes it was just sobbing, faint, like it was coming from the walls of the factory itself. One night, during my 3 a.m. patrol, I saw her again. Not a glimpse, not a shadow, but clear under the yellow glow of the streetlight. The girl, standing in the middle of the road. Same clothes, same pale face. Her head tilted unnaturally to the side, like it had the night she died. I froze. My flashlight shook in my hand. She raised one arm and pointed, not at me, but at the factory behind me. I whipped around, scanning the windows. And in the top floor, one of the broken panes, I swear I saw someone staring back at me. Another shadow. A man, maybe. But when I blinked, it was gone. I told my supervisor about everything. The smell, the voices, the girl. He laughed it off, said night shifts make people see things. But it wasn't just me anymore. One night, a police cruiser stopped by, routine check-in. The officer rolled down his window and asked me if I'd been burning something on the lot. I told him no. He said he'd smelled blood in the air all the way down the road. That was my last shift. I quit the next morning, no notice, no explanation. The factory's still there, abandoned. People in town say it's cursed, that accidents have happened there for decades. I don't know about all that, but I do know this. Every night I worked there after that accident, I wasn't alone. And sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, I catch myself holding my breath. Because if I breathe too deep, I can still smell it. That heavy metallic odor, the smell of blood. I was the sheriff of a small town in New Mexico for almost 15 years. Small towns are quiet, especially after dark. Nights on patrol were usually nothing more than checking in on the few bars, making sure the gas stations were locked up, and sometimes stopping to chat with a night shift worker just to keep awake. But there's one night I can't forget, and I still don't have an explanation for what happened. It was a Thursday in late November. My partner had called out sick, so I was running the night patrol alone. Around 1:30 a.m., I pulled over near the old cemetery on the edge of town. It wasn't unusual. I'd often stop there to drink a coffee and fill out some notes before circling back through Main Street. The place had been there since the 1800s. Rows of cracked headstones, a few tilted iron gates, and a small chapel that had long been abandoned. The road around it was pitch dark. No streetlights, just the faint glow of the moon and the headlights from my cruiser. I was halfway through my coffee when it happened. Something hit the back of my car. Not a small tap, either. It was loud, a solid thud that shook the entire frame. I nearly spilled my drink. Instinct kicked in. I thought maybe it was a drunk who'd wandered too close, or some kid pulling a prank. I threw the cup aside, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped out. The night air was cold and still. My boots crunched on the gravel as I walked to the rear bumper. Nothing. No dent. No damage. No sign of what hit me. But then I heard it, running. The sound of footsteps pounding against the ground, coming from inside the cemetery. Quick, darting, like someone tried to hide. Sheriff's Department. I called out, shining my light through the iron bars. The beam cut across rows of gravestones, weeds swaying in the wind. Nothing, but the footsteps didn't stop. They circled deeper in, weaving between the graves. I unlatched the gate and stepped inside. Every sound felt amplified. The crunch of my boots, the creak of the gate, the faint rustle of dry grass. My light swept back and forth, chasing shadows that seemed to stretch and twist against the headstones. Then the running stopped. I froze, holding my breath. The cemetery was silent again. Silent in a way that felt unnatural, like the air itself was holding its breath with me. And that's when I saw it. About 30 yards in, behind a cracked marble headstone, something moved. Not like a person trying to crouch or hide. It was lower, crawling. The beam of my flashlight shook as I raised it. For a split second, I saw what looked like a figure on all fours. Pale skin, long limbs, bent at angles that didn't look right. Its head tilted almost upside down, as if its neck couldn't decide which way was forward. It stared at me, and then it bolted, not away from me, but directly across the rows of graves, impossibly fast. The sound of its hands and feet slapping against the ground echoed through the night. I pulled my gun, but my hand was trembling. I'd faced armed men before, drug runners, people twice my size. But I had never felt fear like that. My training told me to give chase, but something deeper, primal, screamed at me not to. I stood there, frozen, as it disappeared behind the chapel. The silence returned. Not a cricket, not a breeze. Just the pounding of my own heart. I backed out slowly, never turning my back on that chapel until I was back inside my cruiser. I locked the doors, started the engine, and peeled out of there without looking back. The next morning, I drove past the cemetery again in daylight, just to prove to myself it had been my imagination. The chapel was still there. The graves were still there. Nothing unusual. But on the rear bumper of my cruiser, smeared across the dust, was a handprint. Not a normal handprint. Too long, too thin. The fingers stretched far past what should have been human. I never patrolled that side of town alone again. And even after I retired, I avoided that cemetery. Because whatever I saw that night wasn't a trespasser. And it sure as hell wasn't human. I used to work the night shift at a 7-Eleven in Boston. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it paid my bills while I was finishing school. The store was right in the middle of a busy street, traffic at all hours, people coming and going from the subway station across the block. At first glance, it was the least likely place you'd expect something strange to happen. But on my first day during orientation, one of the older cashiers leaned over and told me, "If you hear something after midnight, don't go looking for it." I laughed, thought she was just messing with the new hire. But then another employee chimed in with a story of her own. And another. Everyone had their own version. Footsteps in the aisles when no one was there, the soda machines going off by themselves, things falling from shelves even when the store was empty. I didn't believe any of it. Back then, I worked mornings. Sunlight streaming through the windows, people rushing in for coffee, students grabbing snacks before class. Everything seemed perfectly normal. But when my schedule got shifted to nights, I started to understand why no one liked those shifts. The first week went fine. A steady stream of customers kept me busy until around 1 a.m. Then it would quiet down. The store, so loud and bright during the day, felt suffocating at night. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the hum of refrigerators, the occasional shuffle of a drunk stumbling in. And then came the first thing. I was restocking the chip aisle when I heard the front door chime. I stood up, ready to greet a customer, but the store was empty. The door hadn't moved. I checked the security monitor above the counter. Nothing. Just me alone. A few nights later, I was sweeping the floor when I heard someone coughing. Not faint, not distant. Right behind me. I turned so fast the broom clattered onto the tiles. The aisle was empty, but the coughing didn't stop. It echoed, moving down the row like someone invisible was walking away from me. After that, I started to notice smaller things. Items misplaced on shelves, even after I'd just arranged them. The register drawer clicking open on its own. One night, I came back from the restroom to find all the Slurpee machine handles pulled down, frozen drinks pouring out onto the floor as if someone had yanked them all at once. I thought maybe it was a prank. Someone sneaking in, messing with me. So I checked the cameras. What I saw made my stomach turn. The footage showed the Slurpee machine going off by itself. No one was there. The handles jerked down on their own. And while I stood in the restroom doorway, staring at the mess, the camera showed something else. A shadow standing directly behind me. Tall, thin, its outline stretched across the floor, but when I turned, there had been nothing. I stopped checking the cameras after that. The worst night came at the end of my second month. It was around 3 a.m., dead quiet. I was sitting behind the counter when I heard someone call my name. Clear, direct, from the back of the store. I froze. No one in Boston knew me by that name, except my co-workers, and none of them were working. I forced myself to get up, heart pounding, and walk toward the stockroom. The automatic light flicked on as I pushed the door. Stacks of boxes, empty shelves, but in the corner, wedged between two pallets, I saw a girl. She was crouched low, her hair covering most of her face. Her shoulders shook like she was crying. I opened my mouth to ask if she was okay, but before I could, she snapped her head up. Her face wasn't right. Her mouth was open wider than it should have been, like the skin was tearing at the corners. And the sound that came out wasn't crying. It was laughter. The lights above me flickered and went out. I don't remember running, but the next thing I knew, I was outside on the sidewalk, staring at the glass storefront. Inside, the lights flickered wildly, the shelves shaking as if someone was kicking them. And standing at the register, in the exact spot I'd been sitting moments before, was the same crouched figure. I quit the next day. That 7-Eleven is still open, busy as ever, employees coming and going. But when I pass by at night, I don't look inside, because I know if I do, I might see her again, waiting behind the counter, smiling too wide. I worked as a bus driver in the countryside of Ohio. My route wasn't anything special, just a back and forth between Mansfield and Ashland, about a 45-minute ride through mostly farmland and empty stretches of road. The kind of route that saw more regulars than strangers. Most nights were quiet, especially on the last trip of the day, leaving Ashland and heading back to Mansfield. By then, the bus was usually empty, maybe one or two late stragglers who nodded off before their stop. But one night, there was just one passenger. She boarded at the Ashland station a little after 11 p.m., middle-aged, neatly dressed, carrying a small handbag. She paid her fare, gave me a polite smile, and sat near the middle of the bus. Nothing unusual. At first, a few miles outside town, I noticed her smiling again, but this time at nothing. Not at me, not out the window. Just straight ahead, lips curled, like she was listening to some private joke. A few minutes later, she started whispering. At first I thought she was on the phone, but there was no device in her hands, no earpiece in her ear. Just low, steady murmurs directed at the empty seat beside her. The ride between Ashland and Mansfield can feel endless at night. It's nothing but cornfields, tree lines, and long patches of black road, lit only by the bus headlights. The only sound was the hum of the engine, and her voice. I finally cleared my throat and asked if everything was okay. She froze, then turned her head toward the rearview mirror. Her grin widened, teeth pressed so tightly together it didn't look right anymore. She held that stare for several seconds before going back to whispering. I tried to shake it off, but about 10 minutes later, her voice rose. She wasn't whispering anymore. She was hissing, sharp, angry words I couldn't make out. Her shoulders stiff, hands clenched on her knees. It was like she was in the middle of an argument with someone who wasn't there. Then came the laughter. It burst out of her in broken, uneven bursts, loud, then quiet, starting and stopping like she couldn't breathe through it. When I glanced back through the mirror, her head was tilted toward the aisle, body shaking, but her eyes were locked on me. And then it all stopped. Silence. Complete silence, except for the hum of the engine. When I looked again, she was staring straight up at the mirror. Her mouth moved, but there was no sound. Her lips formed words over and over, like she wanted me to hear, but refused to let me. I gripped the wheel tighter and didn't look back again until we reached Mansfield. When we pulled into the station, I braced myself to tell her we'd arrived. But the bus was empty. Every seat was vacant. The doors had never opened. We'd never stopped along the way. She couldn't have gotten off. I sat frozen for nearly a minute, staring down the aisle, waiting for some sign that she was still there. But nothing moved. I clocked out early that night. Never took that last run again. Now, whenever I see a late-night bus on Route 30 between Mansfield and Ashland, I wonder if there's someone sitting in the middle row, smiling, talking to no one.